following is a production of Cary TV, the Town of Cary's government access channel.
Good evening and welcome to October 22nd or 21st Cary Planning and Zoning Board meeting. I want to start the meeting with something off agenda, and that is I want to welcome our new member, Mark Evangelista. Mark has tried to get on this board for a couple of years now, and we finally found a way to get him on. And so we very much appreciate having you here, and we hope it's everything you expected it to be.
Oh, thanks. It's an honor to be on the board.
Excellent. And from there, we'll go to adopting our agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda? If not, can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. And then we will move to approval of our September 16th regular meeting minutes. Do we have any changes? No changes or corrections? Can we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a course of motions, and do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. That motion carries unanimously. And with that, we're going to move right into our public hearing process. And before I start the public hearing, I want to just give a little background for folks that may not have been here before for one of these. We're going to begin with a staff presentation that's going to happen at the podium to your right, to my left. And following that, the applicant is going to have an opportunity to present their perspective on the case. And once that has occurred, I will then open the public hearing. We're going to give each speaker 5 minutes to speak. We're going to ask you to fill out a card with our clerk in advance if possible. If not, you can fill it out after the fact. When it is your turn to speak, please kind of queue up in this area over here and then come down these stairs to my right to your left. You will be speaking at the podium to your left. You'll notice on the podium there's a little black box, and when you're speaking, that black box is going to have a green light on it for the first 4.5 minutes. After 4.5 minutes, an orange light is going to light up. And after 5 minutes, a red light is going to light up. And at that point in time, I'm going to ask you to conclude your comments to be fair to other speakers. I'm going to ask you to be concise to avoid repetition. If there are a number of people here with the same perspective, I ask you to pick a spokesman. Please direct your comments to the full board. We probably will not interact with you. That's our opportunity to listen. It doesn't mean we aren't listening or don't care. It's just that we reserve our comments for later in the process. And then once we've heard from all of our speakers, I will close the public hearing, and we will then have a discussion from the Planning and Zoning Board. With that, I'm going to begin our first case, which is 13 REZ 04, the Slade property. Ms. Bierman.
Good evening. This is a public hearing on a request to apply an initial Town of Cary zoning to about 39 acres located at 925 Pittard Sears Road. This is a vicinity map. You can see here this is located to the west of the Amberley Planned Development District, which is in this area. The Old Chatham Golf Club is to the west. To the north is the Chatham Glen subdivision. This is a subdivision of about 5-acre lots. It's located in Chatham County. And the Waycroft Reserve subdivision, which is a Town of Cary subdivision, is down in this area. The existing zoning is R1 in Chatham County. And the proposed zoning is R12 conditional use. There are a number of proposed zoning conditions. There are some changes that have been made to the zoning conditions since this was presented to the Town Council, which is why you're seeing that as a public hearing this evening. The land uses are limited to detached dwellings. The maximum density would be 1.4 units per acre, and this is a reduction from the original proposal of 2 units per acre. There is an enhanced buffer along the northern property boundary, and then there are 3 conditions that are new since the Town Council public hearing, and those include an average lot size of 19,000 square feet along the northern border, and I would add here that the minimum lot size in the R12, the base zoning district, is 12,000 square feet, so this would be an increase to 19 along those northern lots. There's also a 50-foot building setback proposed from game lands that are associated with Jordan Lake that are located in the southern portion of or adjacent to the southern portion of the property, and also a condition that a disclosure statement be provided on the final plat regarding the proximity of certain lots to those game lands. This is an exhibit prepared by the applicant showing the enhanced buffer area to the north, and also the area in blue shows the additional or the building setback that is proposed adjacent to the game lands that I just mentioned. The property is in the Chatham-Cary Joint Land Use Plan. This map shows the boundary of the plan area, and the red star shows the location of the site. This is a closer view. The land use plan designation is low-density residential, and in the joint plan, this limits the residential density to 2 dwelling units per acre. I want to talk briefly about a couple of issues related to comments in the joint plan. First, as I mentioned, the site is adjacent to state game lands associated with Jordan Lake, and that area, that is this area on the southern boundary right in this portion. The joint plan recommends home buyer notification of the proximity to these game lands, and that is included as a zoning condition. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers recommends a 50-foot buffer adjacent to the game lands, and the Wildlife Resources Commission had originally, we understood that they were recommending a 150-yard buffer from game lands. We did look into that a little bit closer, and that larger buffer is reserved for game lands where hunting with guns is allowed. In this particular case, it's bow hunting only is allowed in this portion, and I did speak with a staff member for the commission, and they indicated that the 50-foot setback proposed by the applicant would be adequate. And also point out that the Amberley Planned Development District was approved with the 50-foot buffer in 1997. This was prior to the recommendations in the plan from the Wildlife Commission. The joint plan also talks about density transitions. The plan states that new development should provide appropriate transitions. The LDO requirement is for a 20-foot buffer along the northern property line. The zoning conditions that the applicant is proposing includes increasing that buffer width to 40 feet along a portion of the northern boundary, and also requiring the average lot size of 19,000 square feet for those lots that abut the northern boundary. So we felt that those are conditions that address those requirements related to density transitions. There are stream buffers on the site shown on Cary's GIS maps. These features will be, field determinations will be made prior to the site plan approval. On the Cary Parks and Greenways plan, there is a street side trail shown along the south side of Pittard Sears Road. That would be required at the time of site plan approval. And also the American Tobacco Trail is shown by the green line, and that runs along a portion of the western property line. Pittard Sears Road is designated on the transportation plan as a local street, so it would retain its current cross-section as 2 lanes undivided. This is a map that shows properties that were notified of the public hearing, and the property was posted and advertised as required. At the Town Council public hearing, there were 2 concerns raised during that hearing. There were a couple of speakers that had concerns with the transitions to the north and the potential impact on an existing well located on property to the northeast of the property. And also there was some discussion about the differences at that time between the recommendations of the Corps of Engineers for the 50-foot separation requirement from the game lands and the Wildlife Resources Commission with the 150 yards. And as I previously explained, that difference was explained by the type of hunting that's allowed. That concludes staff's comments, and the applicant is here to speak to the project.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board, my name is Glenda Topp with Glenda Topp & Associates. I'm here tonight representing the property owner, Mr. Slade, who was actually born on the property in 1926 and has lived there since 1943, so he's definitely a long-time resident. Just want to go over briefly our proposal. As staff pointed out, the property is zoned R1, is in Chatham County. We're proposing R12 conditional use. It is in the joint Chatham County Cary plan. The designation is low density, which does allow up to 2 units per acre, does allow attached, detached units. We have a condition that limits it to single-family detached. Our density was reduced to 1.4 units per acre, and we are in compliance with the land use plan. I do want to just go over in a little more detail the changes that were made since the public hearing and the reasons for them. The reasons for the changes were based on comments made at the public hearing before council and also comments that we received through the review process with staff. In one of the comments made from one of the adjoining property owners, we went back and looked at the adjoining lots to the north, and we offered an average minimum of 19,000 square feet. This is in addition to the buffer that was originally proposed by ordinance. The buffer could be part of the lot, but our buffers are going to be maintained by an HOA, so the 19,000 square foot minimum was an addition, and of course we also reduced the density. The plan, the joint plan talks about providing proper transition from the proposed land use in the plan to existing more rural subdivisions, and with the reduction in the density and in the minimum lot size, we do feel that we meet that item in the plan, and that is also in addition to the buffers that we're providing. The other item that we addressed was the issue about the game lands, and As Ms. Bierman pointed out, we've added 2 zoning conditions. One is that no dwelling unit shall be located less than 50 feet from the Army Corps of Engineer game lands. And then the second one is that the final plat shall include a disclosure statement advising potential buyers of the proximity of these game lands. In the joint plan, there is a provision that does recommend a home buyer notification for a new development next to game lands, which we've done. And as Ms. Bierman pointed out, the North Carolina WRC did find that our 50-foot setback being offered as a zoning condition was satisfactory in addressing the concerns with the proximity to the game lands. Again, since the public hearing, we did reach out to the property owner that spoke at the public hearing. I know he's here tonight, so I won't speak for him, but I do know that we did provide the additional conditions to help give some assurances and guarantees that it would be a proper transition from our proposed development to what's already existing. In summary, we do believe the proposed use and zoning is appropriate for the area. The proposed development will be required to meet all Town of Cary standards, regulations, stormwater requirements. It can be served adequately and still serve the surrounding neighborhoods without any reduction in service, and do feel that the good land use planning practices does support this use at this location. And on behalf of the property owner, we do ask for your support and would be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point in time, I'm going to open the public hearing and invite our first speaker to approach the podium.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Logston. I'm a local custom home builder. I'm here to support this community on behalf of, let's call them the new residents of the town of Cary. I'm currently one of the 3 custom builders building in Waycroft Reserve, which is a project right next door. Our price range there is from the mid-500s to the mid-800s. We started that community. My model opened up about 1.5 years ago, and since that time, the concept that we provided there has been very, very successful. The reason it's been successful is that there just aren't many communities like this in the area. The buyers that are in this community are successful people that are moving down to a smaller home. So let's call them empty nesters. But they're very, very active. So they are the typical active adult empty nester, but very successful people in their lives. So there's a buyer profile there. About 75% of the people that currently have purchased in there are all of a very similar profile, mid-40s to mid-60s, very, very active. About half of them moving into the town from outside the area, from outside the state, and the other half being locals that are moving from larger homes, master bedroom on the second floor where they raise their children. Now they want to move down into something smaller, yet these homes range from 3,000 to 3,800 square feet, so they're not real small. These folks don't want cookie-cutter, mass-produced homes. There are plenty of choices for that all throughout the Cary area over in Wake County. In this particular area, in that it's Chatham County, you know, for the young family, they're not going to choose necessarily to live here because they want the Wake County schools, which are perceived to be more desirable than Chatham County schools. So this community really sets up for the kinds of things this particular buyer profile is really looking for. The other thing here is the fact that it's very peaceful and quiet down at the end of that street. So this community that we're proposing now would be a continuation of what we've done in Waycroft Reserve, where there are only about 14 lots left. There aren't many choices for these types of buyers. I would suggest to you these are very desirable citizens for the town of Cary, and mainly new residents. These are, you know, a relatively low percentage that currently live in the town of Cary. They're from the area but moving from Apex, moving from North Raleigh, et cetera, et cetera. So the location of this community is highly desirable based on being in the town of Cary, even though it has a Durham mailing address and in Chatham County. So you can't get much more confusing than that. But all of our buyers see right through that, okay? So the desirability of the community trumps all of that. The open lands around it, the old Chatham Golf Course, the Army Corps of Engineer property, and they do know, by the way, that people hunt back there. That's very commonly known in the community. So that's not been an issue. And I'm speaking for Waycroft Reserve. And what I believe is that with only 14 lots left, we're soon going to run out of places for this particular buyer profile. And so this particular proposed community would be that next location for them. I plan to be one of the builders in there. There may be only 2 builders. And I'd love for you to drive through Waycroft Reserve if you'd like to see what we're talking about here, because, like I say, we've got 14 sold signs up in there, and it's not been a runaway train or anything. This is over a period of a year and a half, but in that these people have nowhere else to go, this is a logical location for them, very highly desirable. So I just wanted to speak on behalf of those buyers and that they don't have many other places to go, and we think this new proposed community could be a continuation of what we're doing in Waycroft Reserve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Yeah, thanks. Hi, my name is Chris Reisig. I am the neighbor in the northeast corner up there. I'm actually the one that raised the question and concern about the well, as well as just the transition. Thank you on behalf of myself and my neighbors for the opportunity to talk to you, express our concerns, as well as, I think, probably more importantly, with Chatham County, Town of Cary relations, the genuine appreciation I have for Glenda, the developer, and all those folks in trying to balance the joint land use plan that was developed over a number of years and interesting times to try to find something that is going to continue our beautiful houses back in there, as well as try to recognize that we have been there for 30-plus years. It is our neighborhood you guys are moving into, so to speak, and trying to balance all that. So Glenda, sincerely, thank you so much. The pleasure, it's been a process. I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but it's been something it's almost enjoyable, so we'll go with that. The assurances and discussions between myself, developer, and Glenda and all, the concern about my well, I appreciate everybody recognizing that, and I feel as we move forward, any issues that might arise will be taken care of. So as far as that being an issue as we go forward, I do not look at it. My big concern was some of the things I saw happen over in Amberley. There's always that one time when somebody puts in a bigger charge and you just cause problems that way. However, the assurances that are out there, I will just go forward and not really worry about it too much unless I hear that real big boom, but we'll go from there. One concern I have, mainly because I'm not sure how all this process works, is that the accuracy of the documents that are going forward. And this is where I think I came into a request to the planning department to come out on site, because the representation of our road and the way our neighborhood is not quite accurate. And this is where it leads into that type A buffer and making sure that that's going to be adequate. My discussions with the developer, I feel that any augmentation we will need there will be supplied. But again, from the town's point of view, looking at it, my request and the invitation is still out there to please come look at it from our point of view, because the road actually runs almost to the end of the our little subdivision. So it's a little different than thinking there's a court that further on up. So just something to get eyes on, I think might, from our point of view, you guys seeing what you're making decisions on will make us feel really good. The only other aspect, and this is something I didn't realize until they brought up the aspect about the hunting and the game lands. They do bow hunting in the game lands. However, in our neighborhoods up there, we do hunt and we do use guns and we mark our areas and things like that. But as a transition for this neighborhood coming in, something I think make sure everybody's aware of, that is an activity that we do north of there, and we do limit it to the seasons and all that. But as you guys are moving into the neighborhood, it's something you might be exposed to. And people that are new on the opening day of hunting season, I don't know how many calls go into the police department, but I'm sure there's quite a few. So we would not want to cause any more consternation in there than we had to. But again, in conclusion, Mr. Slade, I'm pleased with what all they're working with and helping him in developing this land that's been in his property for a long time. Glenda and the developers, has made this process, like I say, almost enjoyable. They are very, very nice homes. I look at it, it's just going to keep my home value up there, hopefully push it up there. And I do understand about the confusion of having a Durham mailing address being in Chatham County. I just bought a car, and with the tax and tag program, they put it into Durham County. Took me 2 weeks to straighten that one out. So, again, thank you, everybody. I look forward to how this goes forward. And, again, the invitation's there to come out and see exactly what you guys are making a decision on. So, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more speakers? Anyone else that would like to speak to us? Seeing no one approach the podium, I'm going to close the public hearing and open this case for discussion from the board. Do we have questions?
Mr. Swanstrom, may I make a couple of comments before you begin your
Of course.
discussion? I do want to point out, as you know, when we look at, there were some comments made about the price points of the house, the type of house, the type of buyers, that type of information. And whereas that may be the intent, certainly no question of what the intent may be, but just to make sure that everyone is clear that only the zoning conditions should be looked at to really, that can really dictate how those lots will be developed. Just wanted you to keep that in mind, that we don't have any controls over some of those aspects of the development.
Thank you for that reminder. And at this point, then, I'm going to open this case up for discussions from with our board. Any questions?
I have a question for the applicant. Will the statement about hunting go to all of the homeowners in that development, or does it just go to the property owners who are adjacent to the land, the game land?
Just to the buyers with the proximity of the game lands is what we were asked to look for.
I would point out that that's a note that the way the condition is written, it would be on the final plat. So whatever final plats would be, whatever final plat that those lots would be on, that would be a note that all of the potential buyers for the lots that would be on a plat for any of the lots adjacent to the game lands would have that note, the way that it's currently written.
Okay. And then what would compel the disclosure of that during the purchase process if somebody didn't do a search on the plat to find that note? You know, I mean, when you buy under the airport, you've got that form that says, I understand that planes are going to, be overhead, or I understand I'm in an earthquake fault zone, or, is that, we don't have control over that.
We don't have control over that. We've included that on the aspect of the development that we do have control over.
Which is the plat?
Which is the plat.
Okay.
But is there any legal requirement anywhere else that be disclosed, particularly before the closing, but when an offer is
we
made?
could, the note on the plat could, we can look for a specific note on the plat, and if that note on the plat could say that disclosure was provided. But the only proof that we would have would be the fact, or the coverage that we would have would be the fact that we could require something to be on the plat, so that we wouldn't allow a plat to be recorded unless it had that note on there. But in terms of any further follow-up to see if it was actually done, then that gets beyond the realm of what we have a control over.
Other questions?
Yes. As far as schools are concerned, I know this is Chatham County and Chatham County schools. And while from the presentation we got from the applicant, it sounded like there would probably not be that many children in those homes. As I said, we don't know. We don't have any control over what eventually will be built and the price points and so forth. Projected range of additional students is 22 to 40, according to your report.
And we don't have that specific information for Chatham County, the multipliers for that. So in this case, we use the only information we have, which was for Wake County, to create those numbers just as an approximation. But please bear in mind that the multipliers to derive those numbers were based on Wake County numbers because they're the only multipliers that we had.
I would expect, since the people more knowledgeable, that is those from Wake County, would know about the difference between Wake and Chatham schools. It may actually be less than that, but there would be some students there. Maybe not as many, but still some. Have you discussed with, well, first, do you know what school they would be going to, or how far away that school would be?
No, I don't.
Does Chatham County have any schools on our side, on the east side of the lake?
I don't know the answer to that.
Can we?
I'm sorry, we can't,
I'm sorry, I mean, I'm a parent with kids that just finished the school system.
I'm sorry, we can't take your comments now.
Do you know if a bus is run?
I don't know any information about the schools in Chatham, I'm sorry.
Okay. Also, I'm a little bit concerned about we look at the traffic issue only on that particular parcel, but looking at the cumulative traffic, it does rise to the level where we would normally do a traffic analysis report and get some information about that. Looking at at this particular project, the number of PM trips would be 58. Previously, we approved the Davis property on Pittard Sears, 10 REZ 14, which has expected 19 trips based on the fact that that was age restricted. And then Waycroft, 53 trips. All that adds up to more than 100. Is there any provision for any kind of a traffic study to be done when multiple projects on the same road, that the ingress and egress traffic would be using the same road, amounts to more than 100?
The requirements that we have now in the LDO for determining whether a traffic study is required is based on the individual development. Could be cumulative impacts within a development if it's phased, but it is for the individual development.
But different developments would not be cumulative.
No, that's correct.
Okay. And I presume the same thing would apply as far as the number of homes. I'm not a fan of connectivity for residential areas. However, I do recognize the safety implications for fire and police of having a large number of homes with only one way in, which this has, particularly if you combined the 45 homes in Waycroft plus the homes that would be in this development together. We get up to a fairly large number of homes that you can get to only on Pittard Sears Road. And if anything happens there, that means you can't get to it. Has there been any opinion given by public safety people, police or fire, about the adequacy of being able to get into that area?
I have not heard any comments with that. I would defer that question to our transportation staff. I haven't heard any concerns related to that issue.
Mr. Jensen has to get up and walk down.
I don't think there's any comments made by our police or fire department regarding adequacy of safety with the site plan or rezoning in this particular area. There's also other ways to get to this property. Obviously, got to get to Pittard Sears Road, but there's also some multiple access points to the Carolina Preserve property as well, that in the event that they couldn't get in at the entrance right there at O'Kelly, they can certainly come through the neighborhoods to get to this. So I think they take that into account when it does these things.
That's why I did not count for that. I did not count the Davis property because that is on the other side of the road, and you'd be able to get to that through Carolina Preserve or Pittard Sears. Right. But I believe this project, as well as Waycroft, you have to drive on part of Pittard Sears to get to it.
Sure, that's one way. You could certainly go through the, like I say, the Carolina
No,
Preserve
I
property
mean-
if you had to. But yeah, at
But
the
the connection
tail
with
end, there's only
Carolina
one way
Preserve-
to get into that area.
The
Correct.
connection of Carolina Preserve, you still have to go on that one stretch of Pitted Sears,
Okay.
okay? But that you haven't heard anything from
I haven't heard anything
Public
that
Safety?
came up for that, no.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? No one? Just had a quick question. We talked about a fairly generous gross density, but we're asking for R12 here. I'm wondering, could we end up having a very dense development in the middle of this parcel and a lot of green space around it? Is this almost approaching a cluster kind of model? I'm really trying to get at the R12.
The minimum lot size would be 12,000 square feet. There would be, depending on what the final determination is related to the stream buffers and any area that may not be developable because of that. In effect, there could well be some open areas within the development, but in terms of the zoning and what we'd be looking for in the site plan related to minimum lot sizes, the minimum would be the 12,000 square feet, except along the northern portion where it would be 19.
Thank you. Other questions? In that case, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve. I move that the board forward case number 13 REZ04 to Town Council with a recommendation for approval, as it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans, and is reasonable and in the public interest for the reasons set forth in the staff report and presentation.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, my reasons for moving that this be approved based on the fact that from when the project was presented before the City Council, there were concerns raised, and it appears to me that the builder-developer has gone out of their way to address some of these issues with the 19,000 square foot lots on the northern border, the increased buffer that doesn't go over into the lots, but it's an independent buffer that will be operated, I guess, by the HOA. The fact that they reduced the allowable number of units per acre from 2 to 1.4. Transition in these developments out in the western area, I see that as a real problematic. Almost every project out there is going to have a border with a large, or with residents sitting on large acreage. It's just the nature of the area. Transition's important to this board. It's important to the city, but I see that as a different type of transition issue than a project that's an infill in the middle of Cary where you have a residential neighborhood and the consideration of a high rise. That's a much more serious transition issue. I'm not as bothered by this transition issue as that, and for those reasons, I think it should be approved.
Other comments? Mr. Miller, we're going to go back.
Okay.
Mr. Miller, please.
I'll just echo Mr. Werner's comments. In the past, I had expressed concerns about sort of we call it density creep in this general area. And they have reduced the density here. This is a low-density residential land use plan. The rezoning complies with the land use plan. They've addressed the concerns that were expressed. The applicant has reduced the density, as Mr. Werner said, buffers, notification, all of those added since town council public hearing. The transition seems to be appropriate. I do share the concern that was expressed about the cumulative traffic impact, but our ordinance is what it is, and the applicant is complying with that, and would prefer to see, sort of in response to Ms. Muir's question, a more proactive notification, although I understand that's difficult to in code and zoning conditions, but it would be nice if that could be done about the game lands. But all in summary, I will support the motion.
And then I think,
Yes. This is, to me, a really tough one because I like it. It's a lot I like about it, particularly the density and the fact that it's fitting with the area. I have visited Waycroft on a couple of occasions looking at houses there and looking at the development, and I'm very impressed. I think they've done an extremely good job in developing that. And while you can't really put a zoning condition in here saying it's got to look a lot like Waycroft, it sounds like most likely it will, which I do like. I do have a problem, however, with the fact that we're increasing the number of students in the area. We really do need to be concerned with the school situation. Are these students going to have to go around the lake, as I understand that they may have to do, to get to a public school in Chatham County? The cost of Chatham County to run buses, because some of that cost would have to be borne by the Cary residents who live in Chatham County. I'm concerned about the cumulative effect, particularly the effect of the large number of houses that can only be reached on one portion of Puddard Sears Road, knowing that the existing Davis you can get to two different ways, but Waycroft and this project you can only get to one way. Plus the cumulative traffic, while it may not be bad on Puddard Sears in the evening with people going home, we don't know that unless that is studied. So for that reason, I would oppose this.
other comments?
I'll just say I'm going to vote in favor of this. It fits the Chatham-Cary Joint Land Use Plan. They've actually decreased what they were, according to that plan, could have asked for. I agree, or I like the other kind of concessions that have been made. I love the fact that the northern property owner has had a relatively good experience with the developer. Normally, a lot of times we don't hear that, so I'm pleased with that. And to me, this fits exactly what, when the joint plan was put together, the expectation of what would have gone here. So I'll vote in favor of this.
Other comments? Well, I'll just note on the school's impact, that obviously is a concern, but anyone that's buying in here is going to understand it. They're going to know exactly what they're buying into. And I expect that there will be a limited appeal then to families that have smaller children that would have to be impacted by the school's impact. And so I wouldn't be surprised if many of the buyers in this development don't have children in the family. If we have no more comments, I'm going to call it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye. Aye. Could I have a show of hands? Okay, and those opposed?
No.
Okay, I believe we have a vote of 7-1 to approve. Going to move on to our next case, which is 13 REZ06. Mr. Grant, I almost called you Mr. Ms. Grannon.
Thank you. For your consideration tonight is a request to rezone property located at 2727 Walnut Street, down approximately 4.46 acres. The subject property is shown here, highlighted in yellow. It's located south of Macedonia Road and east of Walnut Street. An aerial view of the subject property shows 2727 Walnut Street is vacant and wooded, and then there are two parcels of land immediately adjacent to this, which are developed with single-family detached homes. Cary's land use designation for the subject property shows it as office and institutional. It's located within the Swift Creek neighborhood within a mixed-use overlay district. The existing zoning is residential 40, again within a mixed-use overlay district. And there was a 2008 mixed-use sketch plan placed on the properties in question that showed a commercial or bank office. The two residential tracts were incorporated into one large parcel, and then the proposal was for there to be a 3-story building here with a mixture of office and retail uses. There was a second option shown here, which included all 3 parcels that are currently before you and did not include the commercial portion at the corner. What's proposed is for the portion in the center to be rezoned to MXD, and with that comes a preliminary development plan, and that the 2 adjacent residential properties that were part of that 2008 mixed-use sketch plan be removed from that old 2008 plan and just have the R40 zoning designation on them. The 4.46 acre tract in the center is proposed to go from being that 3-story mixed-use building to a single-story, 6,745 square foot financial institution with a drive-through. And then the property at the corner, which is not part of this rezoning, would stay with its current designation for commercial use. And a picture really helps describe this a little bit better. This is the portion at the corner which is not part of the rezoning tonight. This is under separate ownership and would retain its entitlement under that old 2008 mixed-use sketch plan to either be a restaurant or a bank. The portion in the center is what's being presented with the preliminary development plan tonight, and then the 2 residential lots adjacent to that would be removed from that old 2008 plan and have just their R40 zoning designation on them. Here's a sketch of the preliminary development plan presented by the applicant that shows the proposed location of the building on the subject property, a proposed travel network and parking throughout the site, proposed buffers, and it shows you how this use would continue to be integrated with the adjacent uses with connectivity both for vehicles and pedestrian use. Shows proposed and required buffers, street side trails, and connection points throughout the site. The applicant provided this rendering to give you a depiction of where plantings are proposed and buffers are proposed on the subject property. Property owners within 400 feet of the parcel were notified by mail of the request. The property was posted and advertised. Cary's transportation plan identifies Walnut Street as a thoroughfare. And there is a proposed future transit route in the vicinity of the subject property shown with the dashed green line. Cary's Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Master Plan calls for a street side trail along Walnut Street with frontage on the subject property, and the preliminary development plan has shown that. According to Cary's GIS maps, the site is impacted by a stream buffer, and field determination of that would be required at the time of development plan review. At this time, I'd like to call the applicant forward to speak to the plan. I'd just like to point out one other point that I forgot to mention during the transportation slide. There was a traffic study conducted, which did call for some recommendations for access points to the site and turn lane, and the applicant has complied with those recommendations as indicated in your staff report. And I'll be available following the public hearing for any questions.
Hello again. Glenda Top with Glenda Top and Associates. I'm here tonight representing the State Employees Credit Union. I don't think I can really add much to what Ms. Grannon said tonight, so I'm probably not going to say too much. We've presented a preliminary development plan that very specifically locates the building on the site. As she pointed out, it does show connectivity to the parcel on the corner that is maintaining the current use. We also show access and provide a point of access to the parcels that have been taken out of the mixed-use plan, and that was something that they requested. During our public meetings that we had, it became clear that these property owners really did not want to be in the plan any longer, and that they wanted to be zoned R40, and they did come into the planning department and sign the appropriate documentation for that to happen. It is, the use planned is a financial institution. It's a one-story facility with drive-through. We do meet all the town's design guidelines. So there's a gathering space within the site. There's a meandering trail in front. And we do believe that we have provided, as you see on the plan, a development that does provide a reasonable transition both back to the existing corner and to what may be developed in the future adjacent to the property. The credit union is excited to have another facility in Cary to serve not only the general public but also the residents of Cary who do use the credit union. And I'm here to answer any questions. Other members of the team are here, and we ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point in time, I'm going to open our public hearing and ask our first speaker to approach the podium.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and the rest of the counselors here. My name's Danny Cadis. I'm president of Centrex Properties here on behalf of the adjacent property owner, the immediate neighboring property on the hard corner. And I'm here tonight to express my support for State Employees Credit Union Plan, and specifically to let everyone know that they've been an exemplary neighbor in approaching us from well before they're getting started and keeping us posted as to what they're doing. And also, I was not at the City Council public hearing, but it's possible that there were some comments that were made that portrayed as though our relationship was not in good standing, and there were some concerns between us as property owners, and I wanted to make sure that that record was cleared up this evening and let y'all know that we are moving along very well and happily as neighbors, and glad to have them work next to us. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Would anyone else like to address us? Seeing no one approach the podium, I'm going to close the public hearing and open this case for questions and discussions from the board. Ms. Muir.
For Mr. Jensen, is there a U-turn permitted when you're going southbound on Walnut at the intersection with Tryon so that you can make that turn and get back up there?
I'm sorry, when you're traveling southbound
If you're
on
traveling
Walnut,
southbound on Walnut and you want to make a U-turn at Tryon, is that permitted at that intersection?
that, I don't believe there's a prohibition, but I am not certain about that at all, whether we have a no U-turn. Can't imagine why we wouldn't allow U-turn movements to take place since it's a signalized intersection. So,
Okay.
so I would think that you would be able to do that.
Other questions?
A couple. Ms. Grannon, the commercial property that is not part of this rezoning, I understand it will be unchanged, and it would be bound by the 2008 sketch plan unless
Correct.
they came back for a change. And do I understand correctly, you can just nod that the speaker, that's the property you're discussing? Thank you. All right.
Other questions?
Oh, I did have one other. I just wanted to confirm the two lots that are proposed to be taken out of the mixed MXD rezoning, the residential lots, was at the request of the property owners, correct?
That is correct. They're actually part of the application, so they're part of this rezoning case.
Right.
If approved, they would be removed from that 2008
All right,
mixed-use sketch plan.
Sorry, John.
I noticed that there's, on that slide, a stub going right towards one of the houses, which is not part. While I'm very much in favor of connectivity in commercial and institutional uses such as this, but I don't understand the need for that stub going towards a residence.
those property owners are fully aware that the property won't stay commercial or residential long-term. It is currently residential property and rental. They're just not prepared to move forward with a development plan at this time and ask to be removed from the old mixed-use sketch plan. It doesn't take them out of the overlay district. So they would still have the potential, if they wanted to come to us in a year or 2 or 10 and ask for commercial zoning on this property. This sets them up so that they have the opportunity for connectivity and access, through this site back out to Walnut Street.
Would it be possible for the developer to reserve that land for a future connection, but not actually pave it?
Our requirement is for them to show the connection right up to the property line at this stage, at the rezoning stage.
And actually pave it?
And they would work with the adjacent property owners for easements, for construction easements on the adjacent property, so that they could take it to the property line.
Okay.
Mr. Werner?
Mr. Graham, the, what appears to be a retention pond, was that something that you, the city, requested, or was that proposed by the developer?
This is proposed by the developer. The level of detail is going to be addressed at site plan, but this is a general vicinity of where that's going to be located so that adjacent property owners know what to expect.
If they chose not to put that pond in, could there be more development, another building there?
Not with this current plan, no. They'd have to come back through a rezoning. If they wanted to do anything other than situating this 6,700 square foot building in that approximate location, they'd have to come back through the rezoning.
Thank you.
Now, I presume that there's a pond, existing pond, right off of this. That would not be affected by this project in any way.
Those are all site plan related issues to evaluate. I don't have that level of detail.
Ms. Fier?
Is this a pond or is it a BMP? Okay, it's not a decorative pond.
For the record, since they're
Right.
not at the microphone,
Yeah,
it is
it's not a
best
decorative
management
pond,
practice.
it's a BMP, right?
It's a BMP.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is roughly in the same location where the stream buffer is shown on the original plan?
That's correct.
So it's not a buildable spot anyway?
Other questions?
Can I just quickly clarify, BMP is a best management practice for stormwater control and water
you.
quality control, for anybody out there who might be wondering.
Now, the BMP, just to be clear, the BMP is what's shown here as new. The existing pond or lake or whatever is probably an old farm pond or something that's been in existence a long time, and that's off of this site. And- okay.
This is just a form question because I expect it's highly unlikely that either of the neighboring parcels, any of the neighboring parcels will be developed residential, but right now there are 40, which would imply some buffers between commercial zoning and residential zoning. Do we have those buffers reflected in this plan?
Yes. The applicant has provided buffers in keeping with the land development ordinance requirements.
Okay, and in both cases, the two parcels to the, I
Yes.
think they're to the east and then the parcel to the north?
Yes, they are in compliance with the LDO.
I'm actually looking down at the corner. That one as
Over
well?
here? This has got the commercial designation on it. Right here, this
Okay.
parcel.
It's still R40 there, right?
It is, but it's got an overlay mixed-use sketch plan on
That's
it.
right, they've kept the
Right.
commercial
And it's,
designation in these.
right, it is
Okay.
vacant, and it has that designation for commercial on
Excellent.
it.
Thank you. If we have no other questions, do we have a motion?
I'll
I'd like to make a motion.
Oh,
We have a chorus again.
I'm going to jump in here. I move that the board forward case number 13REZ06 to the town council with a recommendation for approval as it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans and is reasonable and in the public interest for the reasons set forth in the staff report and presentation.
Do we have a second, Ms. Muir?
I will second.
Discussion.
Well, This particular schematic reminds me of a coastal federal credit union that exists on Page Road in 54 out in RTP, with the only difference being that the outlying corner parcel really seems to be unspoken for, I guess, in terms of the RTP site. But the access is almost the same, except for here you have a secondary access that is off from Walnut. And this section of Walnut is 3 lanes. I don't particularly see a traffic issue with either egress or points on Macedonia or Walnut. As far as the stub is concerned, I understand Mr. Shaw's concern, but I don't hear any neighbors here speaking about removing this. So I just think this is a pretty tidy commercial type development, and I'd like to see us approve it.
Other concerns?
Yeah, I definitely support this. I've looked at the traffic, and for once, there's nothing about the traffic that concerns me. As far as the need to make a U-turn, I drove down Walnut, and I was expecting to start looking at it when I got to Macedon, and missed Macedon, kept on driving. Found out that all I had to do was just more or less like go around the block, go around the triangle, and I'd be right back to where I intended to be. And it didn't take much time at all. So, and with an entrance on Macedonia, I think that allows pretty easy ingress and egress. As far as the stub, I was sort of concerned about more of the impervious surface if paving that could be postponed. However, if I were a resident in that building or a tenant in the residence there, that's probably where I'd end up parking my car. So they may well not object to it, and I don't have any strong objections. So I certainly will support this.
Other comments?
Just to speak on the U-turn issue, there's a traffic light right at that Macedonia intersection with the apartment development that's across the street. So I would anticipate, plus there's a peel-off lane to Macedonia from Walnut. I would tend to think that the majority of people that are going to be accessing this, if they're heading eastbound on Walnut, are going to make a left on Macedonia. Mm-hmm. They're not going to go down to Tryon and make a U-turn.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
So,
Unless they're absent-minded like me and go by it, but they can go around the block.
That was
or new to town.
Hearing no further comment. Oh, Mr. Miller.
Very briefly, I'll support the motion. It's consistent with the land use plan. It complies with all the ordinance requirements, and it accommodates and has the support of the neighbors while still allowing those tracks to have some flexibility for the future.
Any other comments? I'm not going to jump the gun this time. Seeing no one else, I'm going to call this to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? I think that motion carries unanimously. We are going to move on to our next case, which is a case that does not require a public hearing. Ms. Grannon?
Thank you.
This time you weren't Mr., you're Ms. Grannon now.
This is a request to rezone approximately 4.15 acres located north of Thierson Road. There's an associated annexation petition being presented with this case. Annexation into the town of Cary will be required before town of Cary zoning can be placed on the subject property. This shows the location of the property located northwest of Morrisville Parkway. And as I mentioned, it's about 500 feet north of Thierson Road. It is a landlocked parcel with no street frontage. An aerial view of the subject property shows that it is currently vacant and wooded. Cary's land use plan designation for the property is very low-density residential, and the current zoning is Wake County R40. The proposed zoning is residential 40, a Cary zoning designation, and the applicant has asked to be part of the Conservation Residential Overlay District. If brought into Cary, this would also place this property in the Jordan Lake Watershed Overlay Protection District. The applicant is proposing to integrate this property into the existing Copperleaf Reserve subdivision, and this area highlighted in red shows the subject property as it's related to the approved Copperleaf Reserve subdivision plan. Property owners within 400 feet of the subject property were notified of the rezoning request. The property was posted and advertised. Community feedback was minimal. We had one phone call from an adjacent property owner just asking about future development plans, the Copperleaf neighborhood. Being outside our ETJ, it was not eligible for a protest petition. Just a couple days ago, I heard from a neighbor who wanted to let me know there's discussion about changing the name of the Copperleaf Reserve subdivision, but there was no objection to the proposed zoning. The site is impacted by stream buffers according to Cary's GIS maps. However, field determination is required at the time of development plan review. Cary's transportation plan designates Morrisville Parkway as a thoroughfare. And this slide shows off-site greenway trails in the vicinity of the subject property. At this time, I'd like to ask the applicant to come forward if they're present. I did not see them when I came in. They knew this was not a public hearing tonight, so I wasn't sure if they would be here this evening. And seeing they're not present, I am available for any questions that you have.
Questions?
I have one.
Mr. Miller.
It appears that this rezoning would be identical to the adjoining property, correct?
That is correct.
Right, thank you.
Other questions?
Looks like a no-brainer to me.
I'll make a motion on a no-brainer.
Thank you for a no-brainer motion.
That we forward 13 REZ 12 to council with a recommendation for approval, finding that is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans based on the staff report and presentation.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have, again, a chorus of seconds. Discussion. All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries, I believe, unanimously. We will move on to our last rezoning case.
Who was the second? I'm sorry.
Mr. Gascon.
Mr. Gaskell.
Thank you very much. I hadn't noted that either. I usually keep track of that. Thank you. We're going to move on to our last case, our last rezoning case of the evening, and that is 13 REZ 13, the Anzu property. Ms. Behrman,
Thank
you're
you.
here again.
This is a request to rezone about .63 acres at 6700 Carpenter Fire Station Road. This property is located at the intersection of Carpenter Fire Station and Marsville Carpenter Road. This is a tighter aerial view. It shows the boundary of the site. It also shows there's an existing structure on the site, and that structure is a historic structure that was formerly used as a residence. The existing zoning for the site is ORD, Office Research and Development. This is limited to non-residential uses, so residential use would not be allowed under the current zoning. The proposed zoning is R20. This would allow residential use on a lot size of 20,000 square feet, or about 1 acre, or about 1/2 acre. I will point out this was submitted as a general use rezoning, so there are no zoning conditions associated with this case. The land use plan designation is rural village, and residential use is in keeping with the historic use of the property and also meets the intent of the land use plan for this area. This shows that the site is in the Carpenter National Register Historic District. The actual site is here. And this is a photograph of the existing house that's on the property. This is the historic residence. The applicant is rezoning this property in order to rehabilitate the house to use that for residential use. There is, according to Cary's GIS maps, a portion of the property impacted by stream buffers. According to Cary's Parks and Greenways plan, there is a proposed greenway trail along Carpenter Fire Station Road. Now, I'd point out here, the portion of Carpenter Fire Station Road and Marsville Carpenter Road that the site has frontage on is designated in the comprehensive transportation plan as a local road. There is a current bond project to realign Marsville Carpenter Road and Carpenter Fire Station Road to line up with Carpenter Fire Station Road at NC 55, and that's illustrated by this pink line. That is the intersection, with that realignment, the intersection or the railroad would be grade separated, and construction is expected to begin in 2017 for that change. But I wanted to point that out because that's the reason that the portion of the two roads along the frontage of this property is designated as a local road in the transportation plan. Looking forward to those changes. At the public hearing, there were no citizen comments, no protest petition was received. I did receive a couple of phone calls during the course of the review period, but those calls were not really related actually to the rezoning. So that concludes staff's comments.
And I assume the applicant doesn't want to address us?
Believe the... Okay.
Do you have anything to add, or did she pretty well cover it for you?
No, it was covered on the first hearing, and then she covered most of the questions for us about the reconstruction.
Do we have questions from the board then?
I do.
Mr. Mellon.
My understanding is the applicant has stated an intent to restore or rehabilitate that home, which is a historic home, and use it as a residence. But there are no zoning conditions that would assure that. Is that correct?
There are, that was stated as the intent, but no, there are no specific zoning conditions included.
So in the absence of zoning conditions, it would at least be possible, and I'm not questioning your intent, but it would be possible to remove that house and add a new construction that complied with the
That
R20
would
zone.
be possible with the regulations that we have related to historic structures. We don't have any regulations in place that would require that the structure be maintained.
Other questions?
I have a question about can we go back to the map that showed the proposed greenway trails? So with the realignment of the road, is there any expectation that those greenway trails would change their location? Or
Well, there's another, this map reflects the trails incorporating the alignment. You can see some additional.
the street side trail, yeah, okay. I see
Street side
that,
trail
yeah.
in this area. So these would be trails that would provide connections to that.
And so when they do their redevelopment, then do they have to put the greenway trail, do they have to leave the easement there for the greenway trail?
If there's the requirements would come into play if there's a site plan, if there's a site plan required, if it's just for a single family or a single residential structure where they would just be modifying the structure and living in that as a residence.
Okay, well, let me articulate my concern so as you guys move forward, you know what I'm looking at. But what I'm looking at is that our greenways, I'm trying to remember the width of them, but they're significantly wide, and there's not a huge setback there between the house and the road, and the setback that is there has a huge tree on it. So I'm just looking at where is the space to actually leave for that greenway, and that's not necessarily a discussion for this rezoning or applicable to the decision-making that we're doing here as much as an overall look at maybe other alternatives for how to route that greenway so that it's not as obtrusive on the property.
And that is something that our Parks and Recreation staff could look at also
Okay.
as the development occurs to look at that level of detail for those alignments.
All right, thanks.
Other comments or questions? Do we have a motion?
Yes. I move that the board forward case number 13, REZ 13, to town council with a recommendation for approval as it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans and is reasonable and in the public interest for the reasons set forth in the staff report and presentation.
We have a motion, we have a second. Mr. Warner seconds it. Discussion.
Yeah, I'll just say that I will support the motion. I certainly applaud the stated intent to rehabilitate this structure. It is a contributing structure in the Carpenter National Register Historic District. It is important historically. I applaud the stated intent. I would have preferred to have seen the applicant offer a condition to make that binding. But given the statements that have been made in the various public hearings, I will support the motion.
Yes, I would like to echo what Mr. Miller said. I would like to have seen some condition that ran with the land for any future owner that would prevent them from demolishing the structure and building something totally new and different. However, I still think that the requested zoning is far better from the standpoint of protecting the community than the existing zoning ORD. And for the record, I'll know that a large amount of area around it, all behind it and some in front and beside it, are zoned as ORD. However, the existing use is agricultural and small residences, individual detached residences. So this is fitting, however it's done, whether it's the existing structure or any other structure that might be put there as a residence, it is in fitting with the existing area as it is as existing use. Impact on traffic would be almost minimal, and the rezoning is a benefit to the people, to the neighbors, as well as the entire community. So I certainly support it.
Other comments? In that case, all those in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. And we will move on to our last order of business for this evening, and that's LDO amendments round 26. Ms. Bierman, you're at it again.
Okay. This item is round 26, item D. This was an ordinance amendment that was a part of a number of amendments brought to you as round 26. This one item was held back for further discussion. Just a summary of the changes that we're looking at with this amendment. Currently, there's a separation requirement between telecommunication towers and existing or adjacent residential lots or adjacent zoning for residential. Where there's a new lot that's being created from an adjacent to an existing tower, or whether there's a new tower that's being created in proximity to an existing lot. In both of those cases, the setback requirement or separation between those is currently 1 times the tower height. So whether a new lot is coming in or whether a new tower is coming in, that's the distance that would be looked for. And that's the case if it's a stealth tower that's designed in some way to be less visually obtrusive. That setback is increased to 2 times the tower height where the tower is non-stealth. And again, that applies if it's a new lot being created in proximity to an existing tower, or if it's the other way around where a new tower is coming in and there's some existing lots, residential lots or uses that are there. The proposed change would changed that so that if you have an existing tower and new lots are being created near that tower, that the new lots could be located in such a way so that those new lots could be within a distance of 1 times the tower height rather than 2 times the tower height. So that's currently the case now if the tower is stealth, and so this would apply in cases where the tower is not stealth as well. The reason for the difference between the 1 times and the 2 times was put in there some time ago, related to the aesthetics and making sure that trying to minimize the visual impact of a tower within an existing neighborhood. So that's just summarizes basically the difference with the ordinance that we're seeking to change with this amendment. I would also point out where we look at non-residential uses, then that separation can go down to 1/2 the tower height. So there is some precedent for having the smaller separations from existing towers and uses. Just a summary of the input that we've received on this at the public hearing before Town Council in May, and then at your work session in July. We didn't receive any specific comments related to this item. You were looking at a number of amendments related to the entirety of Round 26. When this came to you on August, at your August Planning and Zoning Board meeting, there were some questions regarding safety issues concerning the differences in the setbacks that you wanted to have clarified before taking action on this item. So that's why this was held back. We did a little additional work on that and are bringing that back at this time for action. We did get in contact with some tower experts. I had a conversation with Cityscapes, which is the town's consultant that the town has used regarding towers and their engineering and those sorts of things. There were a couple of points that were made with that. One, the towers are considered Class 2 uses from sort of a national standard standpoint. They're considered of high importance because of the national importance of having the communications that the towers are used to convey. And the Class 2 types of uses have very high construction standards. It's the highest type of standards when in looking at the engineering standards. It was pointed out to me that they're really engineered not to fail. There's a lot that goes into the construction of them so that the likelihood of any kind of failure of a tower is slim. Where the failures do occur, it typically happens during a construction process, and I know there was a tower failure in Raleigh back in the 90s, I think the WRL tower, one of those. And it was pointed out that during that time that tower was actually undergoing some renovations that may have contributed to that as well. So that's consistent with that. Also, from an engineering standpoint, there's not really an issue with the tower falling at a distance that's beyond its height, just with the physics of the construction. And also that they can be designed basically to fall within whatever radius is called for, with various construction standards for every different type of tower. There's design and construction standards that can go into that. I was told that even with like a monopole type tower, that it was possible to engineer them so that the fall zone could be very close to the base of the tower, within perhaps 2 times the width of the pole itself. So it's just there's a lot of engineering that goes into those, and also that they are certainly typically designed or can be designed with the break point to specify where that falls, and that that fall zone can be done with the great degree of surety as to where that would be, just based on the engineering and the physics. And there's also building code designs, there's also design standards that address how the antenna are attached to the towers. And with meeting those standards, even if a tower does fall or collapse, that they're engineered and designed so that the antenna stays with the tower and doesn't, fly off of the tower. So hopefully, that was information I was able to find. I didn't, there wasn't any concern with, that was noted to me with safety issues related to a fall zone that was as great as 1 times the tower height. So hopefully that's information that you can use to make your decision.
Thank you.
And that concludes my comments.
Thank you. Questions?
Just a clarification, if you could go back to the previous slide with the table. Just, I want to clarify, I'm sorry, the one with the proposed change, there we go. Just to clarify, if someone wants to build a new tower, there's no change at all here. There's still an incentive to build a stealth tower effectively, right?
That's correct.
All we're talking about is if someone wants to do something with a lot at some distance from the tower, that they could actually propose to do that at 1x.
That's correct.
Right, if it's a non-stealth, okay.
I have a question. Is that set back from the property line or from the nearest dwelling?
Property line.
Okay.
Other questions? Well, I'm going to take some responsibility here. I think I raised this question in the first place. And the reason I did is a friend of mine at the time was CEO of a company that did tower maintenance. And he had been telling me over coffee some horror stories about towers that had fallen, so I had that fresh in my mind. I appreciate you doing the additional work to establish that while that may be a problem in some places, it doesn't appear to be a problem here. And so I have no more concerns. Okay. Any other questions? Can we have a motion, please?
I'll move that we, that the board forward LDO amendment round 26, item Delta, to the town council with a recommendation for approval as it is consistent with a comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans and is reasonable and in the public interest for the reasons set forth in the staff report and presentation.
Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion.
Well, I think this is another one of these kind of no-brainers. I did sit in and represent the board on this original work session way back when. I don't even remember how long it's been, but it seems like it's been 9 months. And I got just the opposite impression from our board chair that seldom, if ever, do these towers fall down. That it's basically almost a non-event. Plus, we've had the chance to review this in our work session. And so most of the questions, as yours was pointed out then, have been addressed. So I think that this is a rather simple, straightforward approval process.
Other comments?
Thanks to staff for the clarification, very helpful.
Others? All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that motion carries unanimously. And I think that concludes our scheduled agenda. We have no new or old business.
I will make a motion that we adjourn.
And I believe we have no closed session, right? Staff, we have no closed session, right? We have a motion to adjourn. All those, or do we have a second? Somebody give me a second here. We have a motion. Mr. Miller gives a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, that motion carries unanimously. And now that we're closed, I'd point out that some of us might be gathering across the road at the
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.